I've no real idea how this all came about, but I started to be invited into this deep, deep relationship with an oak that's local
Mhm.
to me. And I was making a kind of near daily pilgrimage to connect with this oak and learning how to hear it. And as you
Mhm.
say, it's kind of so multidimensional. So it was a real learning for me, even just to be able to understand what was taking place. And I simultaneously a very different kind of relationship, which probably had begun years earlier, but I didn't have the context to understand it, was unfolding with the rose as well. I'm pointing here because I always have roses kind of
Oh,
on my desk because it's such an important spirit for me. And so simultaneously I was kind of learning that that rose, that relationship I had with the rose was something much deeper than I just love how they look and I love how they smell. There was actually something opening for me there too. And that journey with the oak went on for a couple of years until one day where, in short, it was like it didn't say this, and this was almost the harshness of the message.
mm,
It would no longer speak to me in that way anymore because it was time for me to have that kind of relationship with other beings, with other spirits, with other things in
mm.
my land, and it was devastating.
Oof.
um um one of the I was like, oh, this is the first time I've ever been able to talk about it without crying, and then
Yeah,
I
I
saw
feel
your
that.
face and
Yeah.
um it was like one of the most heartbreaking breakups of my life.
Mm.
And but it was necessary. It was like a kind of being thrown out of the nest.
Yeah.
And I don't, there's no way I would have kind of ended up on the journey I've been on without that
Mhm.
happening. And I
Mhm.
still go to it very, very regularly, but it's so interesting to, it may someday speak to me again, but it's like, it's there as a presence, a loving presence. And I go and I still give my gratitude and spend time with it, but it no longer speaks to me,
Yeah.
because it did what it needed to do, I'm
Yeah.
guessing. Um, so it feels to me that sometimes we'll have those beings that for whatever reason kind of like thrust us into this whole other way of relating
Mm.
to our land and the spirits of our land. For some it might be a bit more of an intentional kind of step-by-step journey as you're describing, but what I know by now is that it's there for all of us.
Yeah.
We're designed for this,
Yeah.
particularly those of us that are here to be healers of some kinds. We are
Mhm.
meant to be open and sensitive, which has for many of us been a real struggle for much of our lives.
Yeah.
But it's like this is one of the deep, deep gifts, which, as you were describing, what that opens you up to in terms of meaning and belonging.
Mm.
I don't think there's anything that can replace that.
Nothing. There's nothing in my life that has come close to replacing that. And I'm a mother. I have children, and I love my children deeply, and I love being a mother. But it's still, there's nothing that comes. Do you know? You talking about your experience with oak, if it really brings to mind, if I can just speak a little bit of a story of Hawthorne that came to me, because I was just talking about that deeper meaning. So there's two things that really stick out here. One is I had a deep, deep relationship with this hawthorn on my track. I can see it, or I could have seen it out my window. And maybe about 18 months or 2 years ago, I was looking out the window and the electricity company came down the road and they chopped it down. It was getting too close to the power lines. And I'm still heartbroken. I was so heartbroken. A piece of me, I felt like a piece of me went with that tree. And I think there's very few relationships in my life that have come close to touching that profound connection, because Hawthorne has got me through so many difficult times, that you know other griefs and uncertainties, and that when you're first diagnosed as I don't know what your story was like, but when I was first diagnosed with autism, I was reevaluating my whole entire life And it was a really lonely place, and Hawthorne was just there. She just was holding that container, and I would literally go in and just sit and I would just talk to her out loud, and then I would just sit and I would hear messages. And then she got cut down, and I was bereft. I couldn't believe it. And my brother, my beautiful little brother, he went and he collected some of the wood chips that had been left from her, and he bought me a new hawthorn tree, and it's outside on my step now. But do you know what, Lee? I was out there walking a few months ago, and I walked up the track, and she's grown again.
Oh my
She's grown
goodness.
again.
I just got chills.
And you know, that for me is like, if that is not the symbolism of connection and Hawthorne, so Hawthorne is like rebirth and death and rebirth and fertility. I thought, oh, this is like the archetype and the myth playing out in front of me in real time.
Oh my
Thanks
goodness.
to electricity. And so that deeper meaning, yeah, there's nothing that has come close to that. There's no, and I have dabbled in the past with illegal substances and things, but I don't need any of that now, because my world is so joyful and so connected. I'm not searching, it's here, it's right here in front of me.
Oh, thank you so much for, it feels like now, if you hadn't shared that story, it would have been a real loss that we wouldn't have known we'd have had.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And that, again, I think it's like I'm about to say something. I'm going to preface it with saying, I think we can have a very human-centric view on other beings, almost like they're there for us to like symbolize things. They don't exist in their own right and have their own sort of life. And so I think there is always that calling in me to kind of like balance the two things, where it's like recognizing like all of the beings of our land kind of like exist and matter in their own right. They're not here just as symbols for us to have like amazing healing self-illuminating journeys, and yet so that's true. And I think there's reminding ourselves of that, you know, having reverence for them in their own right rather than the kind of ways they can bring meaning to us, I think is important. And like the example you've just given, the way like myth and story and meaning and that kind of like North Star and showing us the way forward, the way that when we have eyes to see it, when we're paying attention, that our worlds are like glittering with that. And to think that so many other people would have probably been parting that hawthorn every day and not even knowing it's there, alone
not even noticed,
even knowing it's there. And I sometimes think that, because where my oak is at the top of a hill, and it's somewhere like, we live in countryside, so it's not like loads of people passing it, but dog walkers would. And I sometimes think, wow, do they not know that this is a portal to like just everything?
Yeah.
Like at most they might know it's an old oak, if they even notice it. They have no idea of like just the world of like beauty and magic that's there. But again, my real, it's more than a hope, I feel like it's already happening, is again those of us that are here to be of service to our communities in some way as healers, as guides, are hearing this one way or another. We're hearing the call back to the land, back to these kind of relationships.